Welcome to the RGR Craft podcast. I'm Ryan, your host, and want to welcome a bunch of new folks that are checking out the show. We have a ton for you. This is a really interesting time. It's a great time to get into home brewing, and it's a scary time for the craft beer industry as a whole and those that work into it. We're going to cover all those bases. And if you're new to the show, this is a podcast that is sometimes video and sometimes audio, and it's based on YouTube. We're going to be expanding here pretty soon to the audio-only version and a standard podcast that you'll find on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, etc. But for right now, today, we're going to talk about a couple of things that are going on. I want to give you some updates on what I'm doing on the home brew scene and what's coming down the line for some new instructional videos, some new updates, and some of the systems that I'm using. Welcome to all the Pico brewers out there. If you guys missed my last video, it was really about the state of PicoBrew. It's the newest system that I have now that I have three, and I try to keep everything moving to do testing, new techniques, more things that I can share with you all, as well as bringing on my co-host, Mike Munhall, who will be back with us soon, in order to give a wider perspective on home brewing and craft beer in general. And eventually we'll add some craft spirits as well. But to begin with, PicoBrew continues to go down the road of self-control, of taking the product that that community has and trying to make the best of a situation where the company is still without a current direction. They have been bought, the auction has been completed, and the auction of the actual property of inventory continues to go on. We've seen a couple of sales from the headquarters. We saw their warehouse get sold out, and the secondary market, both on eBay and in particular on the Facebook group Pico Brewers. If you're into PicoBrew, I suggest you go check them out. Has been quite stout and a lot of innovation coming from what they're hoping to get open sourced, because we don't have a direction from the funding group that actually owns the company now. I personally am still hopeful that they will come up with a business plan after having purchased this entity for what is quite a lot of money. I don't think just selling off the intellectual property is going to be enough for them to recoup their costs that they spend at auction. And this is the funding company that kept PicoBrew afloat for the last 6 months that they were in business as well. So they have a lot invested, I think, not just monetarily, but into the future of what PicoBrew can be. So I'm still very optimistic. I'm hoping that they come up with a plan that is to support the current hardware and maybe reduce their product line so that they can still hopefully try to continue to either design a new product or maybe augment what they have, but at the very least support those users that they already have. They have quite a loyal fan base. I think it's a really interesting system, and I'm looking forward to exploring it more as we move forward. Now, that's not the only product that I've been putting a lot of time and effort to in my recent brewing, and the Brewing Conical is the other one that I have multiple series on this channel about these pieces of equipment, because these are the most interesting pieces to me. They allow you to take your brewing a step farther. The PicoBrew for me is for piloting new recipes, and clearly the Conical is the next step forward in all stainless steel that allows you to ferment at pressure, that allows you to transfer without exposure to oxygen. The sealed transfer is one thing that I will be demoing here in the next couple of videos. I have that shot and ready to go for you, as well as some things on the PicoBrew as well as just general hints, tips, and eventually we'll get to the conversation about how to make everything come together and what is actually the most functional way to use the Spike Conical, which I have the smaller version. It's great, and it's doing a great job. It has made quite a drastic change in the quality of the beer that I am able to produce. And it's not just that equipment, but it's that equipment combined with the ability to maintain my desired fermentation temperatures. That's made quite a drastic change, and I'm experimenting with a lot of things, including the Kvike yeasts that are going to continue as well. A lot of series going on here about my continued exploration of home brewing, as well as craft beer and craft spirits as well. The Spike is specifically really been great about two things that I'm going to highlight in coming videos, but I want to go over them briefly today because the ability to clean them is paramount for me. Coming from originally Carboys, I never really got into the bucket fermentation. It wasn't something I was comfortable with. But glass carboys in particular, with how difficult they were to clean. Then moving on to the catalyst system from PicoBrew, which I still have and I do use on occasion, especially if it's something that I want to let kind of range free rise and go where it's going to in terms of fermentation temperature and its ability to rise as it needs to. I still find that a valuable piece of equipment, particularly as a backup. It is difficult. You can't cold crash in it without a couple of different issues coming up. So that's really the secondary one. But cleaning the catalyst is always an exercise in caution, because it comes down to you want to get it good and clean. You want to scrub it, but there is the ability to scratch it. I have scratched mine. The Triton material is super hard and is very, very efficient at not absorbing flavor, not absorbing any kind of bacteria, but it can be scratched. And I have a lot of small, light scratches, mostly from the cleaning process. And so that is exactly why I wanted to go to the stainless steel. And that's the big upside for me of the Spike Conical, is being able to put the sip ball in, let it do its thing. So I developed a procedure that I will show you in depth in the coming video, but it basically is taking out the residual krausen that still might be left over after you've drained and actually kegged off or bottled or whatever you were going to do. And so you've got it drained now, hot soap and water just to get the krausen ring off, get anything that has dried at the top of the fermenter, get that nice and clean, give it a good rinse to get any residual yeast that might collect there in the actual port of the ferrule that goes to, say, the sample port or the drain valve, whichever you need to do. And then simply mixing up a batch of your preferred brewery cleaner. I use PBW, and allowing that to recirculate in a gallon or a 2 gallon through their sip ball, and specifically through Spike sip ball, which I find does a better job in this particular alignment than any of the others that I've used. And I've used a couple. And just running a simple 20-minute cleaning cycle with the pump that I already have from my bigger system, which is a 2-vessel induction mash vessel that really allows me to do some of the stepping there as well. But that pump is always on hand, and that makes it really easy. And the clean comes out as clean as I could ever want it, as clean as I've ever gotten it by scrubbing. So the ease of use, cleaning in place the sip ball, is really making a big difference for me. The other that I hinted at is that ability to transfer from CO2 pressure without opening the vessel. I have a build video coming for you on how to build what I think is the ultimate spunding valve contraption that sits atop this particular conical vessel, but actually would work for pretty much any that has a top port or port that you can access rather easily. And that makes a big difference as well. Those two things, maintaining the chamber temperature as well as being able to transfer without oxygen exposure, has really upped the game in the way my beer cleans up and comes out. Cold crashing in a stainless steel conical that's sealed and can take up to 15 pounds of pressure makes things a lot easier. I actually seal it and let it self pressurize with CO2 coming off in every case that I can. Sometimes I have to add a little bit, but when cold crashing, say a 5-gallon batch, if I've got a good 8 pounds of pressure in the vessel when I start to crash it, I can take it down to 34 degrees and not have any suck back, not have any pressure, and actually get to about 2 pounds of pressure, which is exactly the poundage that I want in order to transfer it to the keg. So it comes in very handy in not having to opening it, not having to do anything that would result in oxygen exposure. That includes a process of filling the keg with Star Sand, pushing it out with CO2 so that you know that there's none in the vessel that you're going to. That certainly helps as well. But the whole process is something that has to be done in a pressurized vessel that can take that pressure. And being able to do that under temperature control is a really nice way to take what is a hobby at home and make it something you can push the boundary with and get flavors and get clarity of beer and get overall quality of beer that pushes some of your local breweries. And local breweries is where we should finish up today, because the business aspect, while homebrew is booming and you're having a little bit extended wait times for some online suppliers here in the Colorado market, the homebrew stores are doing a very good job keeping up with demand. I haven't had any lag from any of the stores that I do use. And one of them in particular has home delivery now, which makes things very convenient. But some of the online retailers where you get some of the more specialty products do have a little bit of delay, because home brewing is booming and making a big step forward in what you're able to produce. But at the same time, craft beer is suffering because of the lack of tap rooms and because what this virus has done to the landscape. There are a lot of changes going on, and the AHA is among them, as well as a number of closings of breweries that are around my area. Those that had a great ability to either can or crowler or get their beer packaged are the ones that are surviving right now from what I'm seeing. And the AHA is at a disadvantage because their big fundraiser of the year, the events that they're able to put on is what feeds the AHA quite a bit of their capital that they require in order to stay in business and keep making events, education for you. And unfortunately, they've had to do some layoffs. 17% of their workforce were let go just last week. And it is a sad event, but it is something that I think the writing had been on the wall for a bit. Some of those include Akasha Coast, Gary Glass, who you may have seen around the web, particularly on YouTube. There should be a lot of Gary around. He was just on the Beersmith podcast a couple of weeks ago. A lot going on there. I think that there's room to rebound, and I think there will be an economic shift to bring some of that back. But I will tell you this, if you can support the AHA in anything right now, they could use your help, and they are a great resource for you, for me, and for everything else, including HomebrewCon, GABF. GABF has gone digital this year. I will be participating. I hope that you will too. Take a look at that. I'll have more information coming up in a future episode about how that's going to go down here, still scheduled in September. So that said, keep an eye out for what might be changing around your neck of the woods and how you might need to really pull up your plans to either start homebrewing or take your homebrewing to the next level. I hope to give you some options there that can help you along that path as I follow my own path. So we are in this together. I thank you guys for checking this episode out, especially if you're new from the Pico Group or anywhere else. I appreciate your time in checking this. We'll have more for you next week. Thanks for listening to this one, and have one for me.